the patients themselves. Hundreds of millions of rand that have been named there. And of course, the minister also talking about one particular attorney or law firm mentioning non-Ngoba attorneys. And we're going to really get some reaction to what we've heard this morning from this briefing. And for that, we are joined by Director for Rural Health Advocacy Project, Russell Rensburg, joining us this morning. Russell, a good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Some large numbers that we heard there from the minister. And I think obviously some real concern around the victims in all of these fraudulent activities that are taking place within the health department, certainly by claimants of the health department. What do you make? Are you surprised, firstly, by the numbers and also the incidents that we're hearing on attorneys preying on vulnerable patients in rural areas?
Look, firstly, I think we have to acknowledge that despite how these claims are adjudicated, that behind that there is a negligent event, there is a family that incurred harm, and there is a child mostly that has, through complications and errors during pregnancy, has landed up with a lifelong condition and needs care. Right? So I think we have to get it at the bottom to it. Firstly, how do we avoid medical legal claims going forward? And I think a big part of that is just improving primary health care, increasing the amount of antenatal visits that mothers take from 1 to maybe 5 a year, making sure we have better patient histories, and just improving health at the district level to ensure that we can have safe pregnancies. On the claims on the other side, I think this is a complicated issue, which is further compounded by the failure to pass the public liability bill, which is meant to look at how we deal with these things more effectively. And I think in a recent court case, we found that a lot of the things that the minister was talking about were investigations that happened at the provincial treasury in the Eastern Cape, which found that there was a fair amount of fraud in the legal fraternity, which, to my mind, I can't understand why the Legal Practice Council hasn't also been involved in disbarring some of these attorneys.
Yeah. Non-Ngoba attorneys, any knowledge of, the claims that have been made around this law firm?
Yeah, I think those claims are documented in the court judgment between the Eastern Cape, where the Eastern Cape successfully defended what they called a public health defense. And I think part of their defense was an investigation by the provincial treasury that looked at that particular law firm. And I think from those investigations, they found that, as the minister said, the law firm was unable to be able to meet the claims that it already won through the money available in its trust accounts. They also failed to form what they call beneficiary trusts for each of those patients, even 2 years after they were awarded the claim. So in effect, it's running like a Ponzi scheme. They have to win more claims in order to pay old claims.
Well, the minister talking about 7.7 billion rand that was paid by the Department of Health in those claims. That's between 2015, 2016, up until 2020, 2021. And one of the questions being raised, of course, is that, well, the minister, Motsoaledi, was at some point the minister in that time period and now back again in the 7th administration, back in that ministry. Are you confident that as we get this data from the minister today, that this will lead to a cleanup of some of these practices within the sector, particularly with attorneys targeting the Department of Health and health facilities, and cracking down on these fraudulent activities?
Look, I think I just want to re-emphasize the best way to counter it is to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
And that is improving primary health care, and particularly maternal and child health, to improve the patient pathway so that they have more antenatal visits, better patient information, and better equipment to be able to make the right calls at the time of delivery. That being said, I think the public health defense put forward by the Eastern Cape certainly has raised the bar, where the department has to maintain a particular standard to ensure that, because a lot of these claims are adjudicated where the future medical costs are cost calculated of what it would cost in the private sector rather than in the public sector. And in the case in question, I think they moved from a 14 million rand damages claim to something like a 3 or 5 million rand damages claim.
Yeah.
Because they paid general settlements and the like. So I think this is a long-standing problem. I think the South African Law Commission also looked at it, and there are 2 reports that looked at it. So there are 2 sides to the solution. First is improve primary healthcare services to avoid these things happening again.
Yeah.
The second invest in better health management information systems to be able to get ahead of these claims or when errors happen, to avoid abuse, which is something that I think the Western Cape Department of Health does quite well, is intervene early as soon as an error happens, find a way of settling so that you can adjudicate or at least reduce the total quantum of the claim. But the primary solution to this is improving primary healthcare services up to district hospital.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could talk for a very long time, but I want to get more reaction, and we really do appreciate your time. Russell Rensburg there of the Rural Health Advocacy Project. We get more reaction now. Health activist and member of Parliament, Dr Kgosi Letlape, joins us this morning. Dr. Letlape, a good morning to you. I mean, some data, a lot that was coming to us this morning from the Health Minister, but I think this, I'd like to start off with this. We appreciate your time, but what this briefing says to you about our institutional infrastructure and the integrity thereof, when you've got billions of rands that are being bled through by the Department of Health through claims, many of them, as we heard this morning, fraudulent?
I think it says that we haven't prepared the legal framework to prevent this from happening. And I think the minister alluded to that at the end of his talk, where he spoke about no-fault compensation. And it's about time that he brings a legal framework to Parliament for urgent approval so that we have a no-fault compensation system. The advantage is that if a patient is harmed, the patient is harmed. You don't need a lawyer to prove that you are harmed through care. And there would be automatic, just like happens with workmen's compensation. If you're injured on duty, you don't need a lawyer to say that you're injured on duty. You just need an incident form that verifies that you're injured on duty, and things trigger off where you get compensated, you get taken care of. Secondly, what it would also ensure is that for future care should occur in the system that harmed you, not in some other system out there. So if you're harmed in private, are you going to ask for care in the US? That's not affordable. Thirdly, the money for future care should not be warehoused in the legal system. It shouldn't go to a lawyer. It shouldn't go to the Fidelity Fund. If necessary, create a special fund where that can go. And that gets paid out on medical claims, not on being banked by someone. As the person goes for care, the care will be provided. And the statute should provide that care will be provided by the state, in which case it becomes unnecessary to create a fund.
Yeah.
The one other issue that I picked up from the minister is the fact that, I worry about giving lawyers a pass if they come forward. The minister might not have legal authority to do that, but he needs to encourage them to come forward. What he should probably also do is to encourage employees, because there's collusion between employees and law firms. Encourage employees to come forward and promise them that as the employer, if they come forward, there will be no sanctions against them. That would be within his authority, and that would actually work much better.
Yeah.
But I think a no-fault compensation system is needed urgently.
I want to ask you this, Dr. Letlape, and of course, I mean, it's hard for me to ignore it. Being a woman, it's Women's Month, and one of the things we heard from the minister is the true cost of this. I mean, some of these fraudulent claims are linked to cerebral palsy and incidents that happen during childbirth. And so, are you noting that at this point in the country we are losing obstetricians and gynecologists? And I suppose I want to talk about the trickle-down effect of these fraudulent activities, what they do to, the access to healthcare for women in the country.
Yes, we are. And it's negligence from our part as legislators not to come up with a framework that protects gynecologists to be able to continue to practice obstetrics safely. In the private sector, you got to put up at least R1 million in insurance before you could start practicing as an obstetrician and gynecologist. That is prohibitive, and that's negligence from our part as a government and our part as Parliament. So we need to create a framework that protects obstetricians so that they can provide good care.
Yeah.
That's how you protect women, that they have the highest professional service in terms of pregnancy and childbirth.
Yeah, let me sneak one last question in, Dr. Letlape, and that is the gaps that you possibly may see in the investigation that has been run and what we heard this morning. I mean, one of the things the minister talked about is instances where an attorney, for instance, is filing the same claim in different courts, or different attorneys filing a claim the same claim in different courts and then sharing them with other attorneys, and they're duplicated claims. So I wonder if there's work that needs to be done even in the legal fraternity and in the judiciary, if you will.
Well, that leads to the fact that concurrency doesn't work in health. We need a national health system. So when you enter the health system at whatever point, whether it's a private practitioner, a clinic, a GP, or a hospital, that information is captured in a health information system that is national. It's been a failure for 30 years, where provinces have spent billions of rands on information system. The department itself has spent millions of rands on information system, and we've got nothing to prove for it. That is the low-hanging fruit where it needs to begin. Health information system that captures all health encounters, whether they are in public, whether they are in private, so that you would know that this claim has been submitted before. It's the same patient. But it would also help you with record keeping, that people can't steal records because records are kept electronically. They're backed up in the cloud. They're backed up in a server somewhere. So we can't be having people that run a business based on missing clinical records. Negligence from government for 30 years. It's about time that that gets fixed. Health has to be a national competence for all these things to be fixed.
Okay. A very strong point then. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for speaking to us on this Saturday morning. Dr. Kgosi Letlape, the health activist, as well as a member of parliament.